A new car, wads of cash, and gifts galore. Tonight, the former executive director of StoryPoint Collierville, an upscale senior living facility, faces new accusations of exploiting the elderly in his care for his benefit. 57-year-old Timothy Johnson was arrested in December and charged with theft over $10,000 and aggravated burglary after Collierville police say he stole items from residents' rooms. Now he faces a $5.5 million lawsuit alleging he swindled another resident out more than $500,000. Action News 5's Joyce Peterson live in studio with the shocking details from the suit. Joyce.
Yeah, Joy. Kevin Snyder, the lawyer who filed this lawsuit, thinks this case is just the tip of the iceberg. He fears there are more victims of Tim Johnson's alleged thievery and his former employer, StoryPoint, because long before Collierville police arrested Johnson, Snyder had already sued the company for theft and fraud on behalf of his own mother. Inside the impressive-looking StoryPoint Collierville independent and enhanced living facility for seniors, consumer protection attorney Kevin Snyder says something ugly lurks.
People need to know about this because something's not right out there.
Snyder sued StoryPoint last year after the company illegally took thousands of dollars out of his bank account. He also sued them for fraud and violating the Consumer Protection Act when he learned they falsely claimed to be a licensed assisted living facility. His 84-year-old mother, Charlotte, had been a resident there for about 3 years. Her care less than ideal.
We found literally hundreds, if not thousands, of pills scattered throughout the kitchen cabinets. And they were dated back sometimes days, sometimes weeks, sometimes months.
The judge ordered StoryPoint to pay Snyder $25,000. 2 days later, he saw Timothy Johnson's mugshot on the news. The former executive director of StoryPoint Collierville charged with stealing items from residents' rooms.
And it continued onward from there because that's not even the end of it.
Snyder filed this $5.5 million lawsuit Tuesday, accusing Timothy Johnson of gaining the trust of an elderly resident, Marvin Ford, then milking him for gifts, money, even a new car. The suit alleges 25 checks were written to Johnson totaling about $20,000, cash withdrawals of roughly $25,000. Another $20,000 disappeared from a locked safe in Mr. Ford's apartment. Johnson received a new Toyota Corolla worth $40,000, and he wound up in Mr. Ford's trust, inheriting $435,000 when he passed away.
So it begs the question, what's really going on out there? How big is this? Were there other people involved? You know, was corporate involved for that matter? I mean, who knows? They obviously don't care. They obviously don't exercise oversight over it.
Snyder points to this email in which the trustee of Marvin Ford's estate asks StoryPoint if managers should be named in residents' wills or trusts. The reply from the company's customer insights and reputation marketing manager, I don't see an issue with that. Snyder's mother is now in hospice. He's handling the stress and emotional toll of that while focusing on finding out the truth about what went on inside StoryPoint Collierville.
I've seen some horrible things that companies and people do to consumers, but this is by far the worst because you're doing it to the most fragile people at the end of their lives.
All right, I called several times StoryPoint today. Their representatives also reached out via email and heard nothing back. I want to remind you, Collierville police have told us the investigation into Johnson's alleged thefts from those residents' rooms, that investigation is not over. We'll keep you posted. Live in studio tonight, I'm Joyce Peterson, Action News 5.